debate. The Honourable Member for Battle River Crowfoot. My God.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker, and it is certainly an honour and a privilege to once again rise and enter into debate into this place. Now, Madam Speaker, if you would indulge me to share a few thank yous and a few thoughts prior to getting into the substance that we're here to debate today, which is the Liberals' new Bill C-3. First, Madam Speaker, it truly is an honour to serve, and along with that, there's some thanks that I need to pass along. First, of course, I need to thank my wife, Danielle. She has stood through what has been a very, very interesting first term in Parliament. And of course, when we had that discussion about whether or not I would let my name stand again, she was very, very supportive. And we hope that we can see a return to at least some level of normalcy as we move forward. But to my wife, Danielle, I love you. And to my boys, Matthew, Emerson, and Winston, I love you guys. And I'm so thankful for the support that you give, even though sometimes it's a little hard to understand, as it's 5-3 and soon to be 6 months. I'm so thankful for that love and support. And thank you. And of course, Madam Speaker, I would thank my staff, my campaign team, my EDA, all those that help make an election happen. And Madam Speaker, I'd also like to take a moment to thank, in what was undoubtedly a difficult election in many, many ways, I'd like to thank those other candidates who ran and showed up. There was one party that notably didn't even show up in this last election, and that was a travesty for democracy in East Central Alberta. But Madam Speaker, anyone who puts their name on the ballot deserves thanks and respect, and they have that for those who ran in Battle River Crowfoot. And of course, all those poll workers, the local individuals that helped make sure that an election could happen, that an election that I would suggest, and I'll get into this in a moment, that maybe nobody really wanted except the Prime Minister who sits across the way. But Madam Speaker, they also deserve our thanks. Madam Speaker, and of course, I am deeply grateful to the people of Battle River Crowfoot for once again sending me to be your voice in our nation's capital, to ensure that the interests of rural East Central Alberta are heard. And Madam Speaker, that is certainly what I plan to do. Now, if I could, again, Madam Speaker, share a few thoughts, a few observances from the election. You know, I found it very, very interesting how not just 2-3 months prior to the Prime Minister's itinerary coming out saying there was a visit to the newly appointed Governor General's residence, that I couldn't help but think that he'd be going back on his word. Now, that won't surprise many within this place and many Canadians, that the Prime Minister, that we can't take the Prime Minister's word all that seriously. As a fourth wave, the signs were already there, yet he put his personal political interest before the lives of Canadians. Madam Speaker, that is a shame, and something that literally put his political interests before the lives of Canadians. Madam Speaker, that is, well, there's some unparliamentary language that comes to mind, but I'll spare that. Madam Speaker, over the course of the summer and of course during the election, I had the chance to speak with a whole bunch of constituents who brought up a myriad of concerns. One was a man by the name of John Dillon, and he brought forward something that I told him that I would share in this place. I'd spoke with as well during the previous election, but I was reminded when I went to his door again, this 40-year Air Force veteran. He asked a question about why parliamentarians, why politicians get preferred treatment over men and women, the men and women who wear our nation's uniform. Why it takes him decades to qualify for his pension, while it takes a politician 6 years. And we continued to talk over the course of a fairly extended period of time, Madam Speaker, about some of the frustrations that he has, about the hypocrisy and the frustration with the political status quo in this country. Madam Speaker, I know 10 minutes is not a lot of time, and I hope to get to as much as possible, but I also spoke to constituents who were frustrated beyond beliefs on all sides of the political spectrum about how divisive and polarized politics are in this country. You know, Madam Speaker, the number of times where I would encourage constituents I was speaking with to make sure that they looked a little bit beyond Facebook in terms of making sure that we were having dialogue. And certainly there's politics and partisanship in this House, and that's okay. But, Madam Speaker, we also need to make sure that we are always working for the best interests of Canadians. Madam Speaker, the concerns around Western alienation are very, very real. And I talk to many people who have given up hope on Canada. Madam Speaker, it is heartbreaking as I spoke with many constituents, more than I can count, about those who would suggest that an independent path forward was their only option. And Madam Speaker, as I pled with them and we spoke about the issues and talked about how it's not too late to give up hope on this country in spite of the many frustrations. Agriculture, as we saw rumors that the Liberals would be mandating a reduction in fertilizer, taking away what could very well take away the livelihoods of farmers in my constituency. We heard rumors about further activism when it comes to the oil and gas sector and whatnot, which turned out, Madam Speaker, to be more than accurate when A, the Prime Minister appoints a criminal activist as his environment minister, and B, goes to COP26 and decides that the only justice in a transition is to put my people, my constituents, out of work. Madam Speaker, that is shameful. Madam Speaker, from COVID challenges to the challenges with our economy, it's Canadians that are paying the price. And I certainly look forward to being able to stand up for their interests. Hear, hear. So, Madam Speaker, now onto the substance of C3. Here, Madam Speaker, it's interesting that you see an issue that Conservatives have actually talked a fair bit about, and provinces have actually taken action on, and that's access to critical infrastructure. Now, Madam Speaker, I think that almost all Canadians would agree that a healthcare professional going to work or a patient needing care should not be denied access to a hospital. Madam Speaker, that's simply, I would hope, common sense, although as I'm reminded often by including my father, that common sense seems to be not so common anymore. But Madam Speaker, what I find interesting is that in the midst of this debate being part of this two-part bill, and I'll get into that in a second, that we have it's in the political interests of this Liberal government to now bring forward something that they saw a political opening for. Whereas Conservatives had actually called for this sort of action when critical infrastructure had been placed at risk. Supply chains had been put at risk in the past, and a number of Conservative governments across the country have actually taken action to ensure that the critical infrastructure is protected. Madam Speaker, I would suggest that is a good thing, and certainly something, although I do have a few concerns about some of the ambiguous wording, and I found it interesting that the Liberals are quick to defend the appropriate balance that needs to be had to ensure freedom of speech, but also to ensure safety of healthcare workers. And I'm glad that there are some Liberals that are encouraging that discussion to take place, because certainly when it doesn't fit their political best interests, they'll try to shout down any freedom of expression that they can. And Madam Speaker, it is, so as this bill, I would suspect, goes to committee, it certainly is one of those issues that we need to keep at the front of our minds. Madam Speaker, to jump into part two, and I would just say, though, before I get into the substance of part two of this bill, I think that it's interesting that you have what is kind of a mini piece of omnibus legislation. You have two very, very different subjects that are addressed within this one bill. And Madam Speaker, I would suggest that this goes against certainly the spirit of if not directly against what the Liberals promised back when they ran for election first in 2015. Madam Speaker, two very, very distinct issues, and I would be certainly encouraged if the Liberals were willing to send it to the two different committees where this could be addressed. When it comes specifically to the issue of the paid sick leave aspect of this, there's some very, very basic questions that I certainly have. How many people does this affect? You would think that if you're planning on implementing paid sick leave to all federally regulated industries within this country, Madam Speaker, that there would be the very simple, that question would be one of the first that you would answer. Yet I have yet to hear a Liberal member articulate what the answer to that question is. Madam Speaker, there is some further ambiguity about what this actually applies to in terms of contractors or simply federally regulated services. But if a contractor works in a federally regulated service, but that service itself is not regulated, what is the application? Madam Speaker, that's quite frankly why it's concerning that these two very distinct issues are put together in one bill. Whereas had they been separate, I think that we'd have had a great, it would have been certainly more.
It's time for questions and comments, but before we go there, I'd like to remind the honourable member to perhaps think before accusing certain members of this House of certain things. Questions et commentaires, questions and comments. The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Government House Leader.
Yes, thank you, Madam Speaker, and I'll stay away from what it is that the member might be trying to impute within his comments, but rather to say that, within the legislation, we have the 10 days paid sick leave. And no doubt there's a number of questions and thoughts in regards to it, and we're hopeful that it'll go to committee where those questions and answers will be posed and responded to. I think it's important that we recognize that the Ottawa does play a strong national leadership role on it. Take a look at the province of British Columbia, where I understand BC, NDP BC now is proposing 5-day paid leave. And my question to the member is, does he not recognize or see the value in Ottawa implementing legislation such as this and in the positive role and impact it could have on other jurisdictions?
The Honourable Member for Battle River Crowfoot.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I appreciate the question. I would simply say this. If that member can clearly articulate some of the questions that I've expressed about this particular part of the legislation, and if he was willing to see it split up and sent to both committees to be studied, he's absolutely right. Ottawa plays a role. But I also hear daily from constituents who are quite frankly sick and tired of hearing an Ottawa knows best strategy about all aspects of public policy within this country. And Madam Speaker, there certainly is a great deal of frustration with how this Liberal government has it seems to only call for a Team Canada approach when they've failed. And I am fearful that that's exactly what we're starting to see as this legislation goes through the process. Thank you.
Questions et commentaires, l'honorable député de Laurent.
The Honourable Member for Laurentides-Labelle. Thank you, Madam Speaker. There's been a lot of talk about urgency and taking important action. There was a lot of talk about that during the elections. Then we waited 65 days to get back to the House. I'd like to hear my colleague about C3. There were so many promises made during the election. Does my colleague feel that now, when there is so much urgent work to do, that this is the right time?
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And my colleague from the Bloc is absolutely right. In fact, Madam Speaker, I find it tragically ironic that the day of the election was meant to be the day that this House was supposed to be back in session. Madam Speaker, that is weeks upon weeks upon weeks, let alone the administration required to set up committees and whatnot, that see us not even at this point with only a few committees being set up currently, and Madam Speaker, months, I would suggest, of delays. In addition to, of course, the prorogation that the Prime Minister promised he would never do and all of that sort of thing, but they'll say that's simply old news, and it was different because they're Liberals. Madam Speaker, delays have cost Canadians and probably cost Canadians lives. And I would suggest that Canadians demand leadership, and they certainly haven't seen it from that Liberal government.
Questions and comments. The Honourable Member for Courtenay Alberni.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I want to thank my colleague, especially for recognizing his own family. I think it's really important to recognize the service of public people serving in public life. Madam Speaker, he talked about urgency and he talked about people's lives being lost. I mean, medical health professionals, again, they've cited people need to get vaccinated and governments need to implement paid sick leave. But we haven't heard from the Conservatives, where they're at when it comes to paid sick leave, whether they support it or not. Are they are they going to stand up for workers? Or are they going to let them continue to go to work sick and make that difficult choice? And when it comes to vaccines, I guess the question to them too, we still haven't got a clear answer on that either.
The Honourable Member for Battle River Crowfoot.
Well, Madam Speaker, I find it very, very troubling you'd have the Liberals' coalition partners in the NDP playing into the divisive vaccine politics that we saw during the election that caused a level of division and, quite frankly, Madam Speaker, mistrust when it comes to such an important issue. Something that should have been the definition of not being political, Madam Speaker. That government decided that it was more important to play politics than to do what was right for Canadians. When it comes to the reality that is faced by so many Canadians, including workers, making sure, I find it rich, Madam Speaker, that it would be the NDP that stand up and say that they support workers when there are thousands of workers within my constituency that are having their livelihoods shut out because of the activism of a Liberal NDP coalition. Madam Speaker, Canadians demand, in fact, more Canadians decided that Conservatives would be the better option than any other party in this country when it comes to a plan that would get our economy working again, Madam Speaker. And it's unfortunate that the Liberals would rather play politics and put people out of work than stand up for what's best for Canadians.
During debate, the honourable member for Barrie Ince. The honourable member for Saanich-Gulf Islands on a point of order.
Yes, Madam Chair, I was listening attentively to my honourable friend from Battle River Crowfoot, but I thought I heard him say something very unparliamentary. I didn't interrupt the course of questions and commentary because I wasn't sure I'd heard it. But I wanted to ask you, Madam Speaker, to check the record. If our honourable colleague referred to the Minister of Environment and Climate Change as a criminal, then that it does violate our rules. It is not only inaccurate, it's spurious. And I would, if it's possible at this point to get a ruling, if you as Speaker heard that, it certainly is unparliamentary.
I thank the honourable member for the point of order, and I did actually call on the member right after his speech on the subject. The honourable member for Battle River Crowfoot.
Madam Speaker, if I said anything that wasn't true, certainly I do unreservedly apologize.